We have the pleasure to have with us this year Irena Kogan, who is chair in comparative sociology at the University of Mannheim. Her research interests are related to social inequality, immigration studies, and labor market sociology. And in particular, she has done extensive research on immigrants integration, or the cultural and economic and social aspects of immigrant integration in the receiving countries. She's involved in a number of large-scale projects. One of them is quite interesting for the people who are doing research in immigration, because it's a survey in 4 countries, if I'm not wrong, Germany, Sweden, UK, and the Netherlands, following children along their life course trajectory, which I think is a really interesting resource for researchers on the topic. She is the principal researcher also of 2 different research projects, one of them on partnership formation in the context of refugee immigration, and another one of upwardly mobile through STEM fields of study, which is quite interesting. So part of this research has been published in a number of leading journals in immigration and social stratification, like European Sociological Review, Research in Social Stratification and Mobility, International Immigration Review. So I think most of you perfectly know Irena. She will be showing us part of this research. So thank you, Irena, for coming to us, and the floor is yours. You have this.
Yeah. I think this one. Yeah. Let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
right.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this kind introduction. I'm always happy to come to Barcelona and to Pompeu, Fabra. I have a lot of nice memories, and we had very nice meetings and discussions here. So I'm very much looking forward to discuss the study which I will be talking about. And the general question which I will ask in this study is whether heterogeneous Western societies are ready for intermarriages with culturally distant immigrants. So this is the question I will try to we will try to answer. This is not yet a paper. This is kind of a paper in writing together with my colleagues Stefanie, Heyne, and Jana, Kuhlemann, all from University of Mannheim. The paper is part of a bigger project. I think something happened. Doesn't go.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, I think we should press once here and then it won't go.
I'm checking.
No, I think it doesn't mouse. I know sometimes it helps to do something like that. Yeah. So I'll take a mouse. Okay, so this paper is written in the framework of the project, RC project partnership formation in the context of refugee migration platform. Again, these are my colleagues in the postdocs in the project, Shadia Purida, Stefanie, Heyne, and Jana Kuhlemann. Just to motivate, why did we start analyzing? Why it's interesting and important. What I see here, what you can see here is age distribution for refugee men who arrived in Germany between 2013 and 2015. It's actually a like demographic way of showing distribution or age gender distribution. So what you see here on the left side, you see men presented. On the right side, you see women presented, and this pertains to refugees arriving in this time period. So what we obviously see, we have a very serious disbalance between the 2 genders. Particularly, this disbalance is prominent in younger ages. If you go like starting from 18 to at least 40 years old, we have significant disbalance. Moreover, I will tell you that a majority of these men arrived in Germany. I think it's particularly pronounced in Germany. It's known. Overall, we all know that this migration wave those coming from largely from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. They were mostly male, but in Germany there were particularly very many young male unmarried men. So the question we ask in this project is, first of all, we have obvious skewed sex ratio. That is, if we kind of take into account that we know a lot about partnership formation patterns, that people prefer people coming from the same origin, cultural background, and so on, we would argue that we might have a partnership formation issue, that very many of these men will not find partners among the same co-ethnic population in Germany, because there are none. So the question we ask in this project is, first, we would like to understand what's going on, how these young men who are actually in Germany to stay, how they will find their partners, whether they would search among the majority population, whether they would search among the other minorities, similar in religion or language, or whether they will start some sort of transnational partnership formation, searching in their countries of heritage or via some partnership websites even. That's why when it comes to the second point, which we will also shed our light on, is the role of online dating and social media. We know there is emerging research, mostly among the American setting, but also in other settings, but mostly relating to the general population without a specific focus on migrants, relating to this online dating behavior. And we know that these are the groups which are very social media affine. They have high penetration of smartphones. So our question is, to what extent, the other question, to what extent social media and online dating plays a role in the partnership formation, whether it kind of helps to bridge the gap to the mainstream, or it kind of brings them to their countries of heritage. And the third question we ask, and one which I will address here, is how the majority, the established population in Germany, in this paper and in this project, reacts possibly to the potential partnership attempts from the refugee population. We normally, when we model partnership formation among immigrants, we tend to focus predominantly on immigrant population. And we'll tell you some theoretical ideas about that, but we largely ignore the readiness of the other part, of the majority, to engage in partnership. So it might well be that due to the structural conditions, the lack of females of the same origin, many of the men would like to have a partner in the majority population, but the question is whether the majority population, and here I mean not only majority native born, but also established population, maybe immigrants, children of immigrants, so the whole heterogeneous population, what if they are not ready to partner with refugees? So for this project, we will collect a data set, which is actually in making now, a three-way panel survey of recent refugees from Syria and Afghanistan. We will focus on these two groups, Syria and Afghanistan, because these are the two largest groups of male immigrants in Germany. And they share some similarities, but also some differences. And in our project, we will focus, the kind of interesting component of our project is that we will not only focus on marriages, because empirically we might not expect too many marriages in this short period of time, but we will go on various partnership constellations, looking at casual relationships, committed relationships, but also marriage. And we will look both on factual information and their preference. On the other hand, we will also look at the majority, or I do not call it majority, on the established population. And here we introduce specially tailored instruments into the established German data set. The data sets I listed here I listed, they abbreviated because you probably do know them, but just to let you know, the first two, so-called JIP and MZES panel, these are online panels. Both are online panels, both are representative online panels. They are run, JIP is run by University of Mannheim. MZES panel is run by MZES, which is Institute of Social Sciences, collecting a lot of data in Germany. And finally, SILS for EU data set. This is the data set that Luis mentioned some minutes ago. This is the data set we collect in the framework of our project. And I will come into this project in a minute. So the first two pertain to the general population. SILS for EU is focusing on the young people. So it's a cohort study on the young people. So what we try to tap in this all data collection, in the first two, we try to collect the general attitude of the population towards partnerships with refugees or towards partnerships of hypothetical relatives with refugees. And in SILS for EU, we really going into detail about measuring preference, because these are young people approximately in the age of the young refugees we have, so they're actually all on the partner. So we are kind of trying to check whether to what extent they are prepared to partner with refugees. We also have a lot of information on usage of online dating and social media. So we will be able to compare whether refugees have different patterns of partnership search compared to the other young people in Germany. And the key instrument, especially tailored instruments, is a vignette, is a factorial survey design. I will tell you more about that. Capture the attitude of the German population towards interethnic partnerships of recent refugee migrants with various characteristics. And we will not only ask our respondents, would you kind of accept having a partner in refugee, but we will also provide potential characteristics of this refugee in order to make sure that there are trade-offs or there are potential heterogeneities. Let me give you an example. Maybe some highly educated native born would pretty much consider having a partner with a refugee who's highly educated, non-religious, or even Christian. On the other hand, maybe they would strongly reject someone who is lowly educated and highly religious. So we assume that might be heterogeneity within the refugee population, which many studies ignore and which we will try to disentangle. So the key instrument, okay. The contribution of this study would be to show you our factorial survey results from this factorial survey experiment, which is actually in a sense produces some sort of vignettes. I will show you in a moment on partnership preference of natives and established migrants in Germany, which we already implemented in the SILS for EU data and have some preliminary data on that. So why is a factorial survey experiment is helpful in this result, in this regard? With the factorial survey experiment, we are I'm supposed to do right. This instrument will allow us to measure preferences, particularly homophily preferences, directly, and will allow us to disentangle highly correlated characteristics of individuals, which we very often cannot capture in a normal attitudinal question. We'll show you exactly the examples. And this would allow us to test different theoretical explanations for ethnically homogeneous partnerships. Our second contribution is to look into detail in the variation in a variety of partnerships. So partnerships which differ in the level of commitment, starting from dating, or as we call it also casual relationship, committed partnership, and marriage. So we kind of check various types of possible relationship to see how homophily works regarding whether this relationship is strongly committed or marriage, or whether it's just a casual relationship. And finally, our final contribution is actually to look at the attitude to recent refugees from Syria and Afghanistan, and there is little information on that apart from very general questions. Okay, so let me walk you through shortly along theoretical considerations. And once we discuss partnership formation among immigrants, we tend to rely on a well-known study in Annual Sociological Review, quite seminal already, from Matthias Kuhlemann, who introduces three sorts of factors based on theoretical, obviously theoretical ideas, three groups of factors which are relevant for when we discuss partnership formation. Maybe you already heard about that. First is related to individual preference. Individual preferences normally for homophily, and I will go into detail into homophily in a minute, but in principle, it's about individual preference toward partners who are similar to us, because it has been shown that having similar partners similar on a variety of characteristics, particularly the characteristics which are important to the individual, helps to maintain successful partnership. Obviously, we know that opposites attract and things like that, but in practice, longer-term relationships are actually the ones which occur between individuals who are similar on many characteristics. Such similarity may occur in terms of educational attainment. So imagine people who are highly educated have a lot to discuss with one another, or also very important feature or dimension for individual preference is cultural homophily. That is, if people were socialized in the same environments, that is, they came from the same country, or they share joint religion. We know pretty much well that it's very difficult in perspective to raise children and so on. Partners come from different religions, and there's a conflict in religion regarding some things. The second important feature or dimension is opportunity structures. Opportunity structures of the partner market, and here the key idea who does not meet does not make. So there should be an opportunity for meeting. And the figure I showed you in the beginning, this skewed ratio, sex ratio, is actually part of this opportunity structure. So are there opportunities for a refugee, migrant, a person to meet someone who is similar? Yeah? And if, as we saw from the figure, there are actually handicaps for that, then these handicaps or these restrictions should be overcome. Opportunity structures also mean places of meeting like universities, at work, or online platforms. So these are all opportunity structures. And the third group of explanations are third-party influence, and here it's about the family, it's about the religious community, and so on, for likely to influence partnership formation. Obviously, the influence of third parties might differ across cultures. We know that in Western culture, we could say that maybe family has not much to say when people choose their partners. But if you're in more traditional societies, they have pretty much the same. So they might veto, in very traditional societies, they might veto certain partners. There is also in some traditions, there is also a way that partnerships or marriages in particular are arranged in some sort of arrangement between families and parents. So pretty much we have influence of others. In this paper today, I will particularly concentrate on preference, because the instrument we are going to use is able to directly measure preference. And when we talk about preferences, we will try to directly measure homophily preferences. I will also introduce you, if you don't know yet, the so-called the winnowing hypothesis. And finally, we will also talk about this in and out group distinctions. And these are three theoretical strands. I will shortly talk in a minute. Okay, no. Here we go. So regarding the homophily, I already started with this, and in principle here, the key idea that we all have preferences for some individuals, and for partnerships or for partners, we are looking for someone who has similar interests, similar attitudes, or similar socioeconomic status. Yeah, and this is a well-known idea. It comes actually from the economic theory, which says that there is a higher utility of homogeneous partnerships. What does it mean? That homogeneous partnerships are the partnerships which are less likely to experience more conflicts based on all those dissimilarities that might occur in terms of attitudes, let's say, socioeconomic status. There's need much more negotiation necessary to come to a solution in a partnership if there are a lot of dissimilarities in this component. So basically, based on that, and this is a very short introduction, we would argue that we would find also here higher preferences for persons with similar characteristics. And these are the characteristics we will look at: education, religious denomination, and level of religiosity. So basically, we expect that the mainstream population will also prefer, if at all, if they at all prefer refugees, they would prefer refugees of similar education, of similar religious denomination, and a similar level of religion. The second thesis I mentioned is so-called winnowing hypothesis. And the key idea of the winnowing hypothesis is that the strength of endogamy or the strength of homophily depends on the level of commitment. This thesis allows us to see the variation in the level of acceptance of homophilous relationship depending on the level of commitment in the relationship. So what does it mean? It means that if I'm just dating someone, casually met for a coffee a couple of times, I not yet much care whether this person is very similar to me, because it will not last. I know that, or even let's take a very common one-night stand. Nobody cares who's the other person, so there is no much search for this strong homophily. However, if it goes into the direction of marriage, maybe first committed relationship or marriage, that people do care who the other person is, because committed relationship or marriages have longer-term consequences, meaning that there might be children in the end of the day. And so this winnowing thesis argues that utility of homophily increases with the level of commitment, because when there are high costs, it matters to the debate. So, but also it's not only preference, but also the third party influence increases when we're talking about more committed relationship, peer pressure, parental influence, also the influence of religious communities, and so on. That's why we know that in some cultures, and for example, Afghan culture, we had, by the way, a couple of qualitative interviews, and people could not even talk about dating. They did not really understand what dating is and how there's no dating practically. There is among the majority of the traditional people, there is no dating. They discovered dating here in Germany. So these are all this kind of third-party influence or third-party pressure that there is just marriage or nothing or something like that. So based on that, we would argue or we test whether higher openness to date or have a committed partnership, there is a higher openness to date or have a committed partnership than to marry a person with non-homophily attributes. So we test whether we really find this tendency stronger homophily with more committed relationship. The final theoretical idea I will talk about is the idea of in and out group distinction. And this distinction, this idea of in and out groups goes back to social identity theory, which argues in general that all individuals strive for positive self-concept, or for preservedness enhancement of oneself. So we're kind of searching for identity. We have identity, and self-concept is very often associated with belonging to certain social groups, which brings us, or the scholars, to the distinction between in and out groups. So people with whom we identify ourselves as our social groups, a group are for us an in-group. So these are groups with which we share identity, with which we share common features. In contrast, the others are the out-group. Out-group can be of various kinds, and important to remember that according to this theory, we tend to prefer an in-group. We prioritize an in-group. Why? Because we know in-group are we, and we find more things positive about an in-group because we are raised with a certain kind of self-concept, and all people who belong to this concept are similar to us, and we understand them better. And we try to, very often we exaggerate the differences of the out-group, and we judge them more negatively than we judge similar maybe characteristics of the in-group. So there is this tendency of kind of favoritism for the in-group, and negation or anti-favoritism, say, for the out-group. However, we have to bear in mind that these in and out groups are not stat or not stable. In-groups can be formed in various dimensions. For example, by heritage. This is very common how it's used. So heritage in the sense, all people born in Germany would consider themselves an in-group. Then there is a question, okay, what about people coming from Austria? Are they out-group? One could say, okay, maybe yes, because they share a different country, but they speak the same language. So in terms of language, it's an in-group. In terms of broader ethnic background, is very similar group. In terms of kind of historical, traditional country belonging, this is a different group. So what I want to say is identity or identification or sorting in and out group is flexible. It depends on the category you are taking. And this will be important for our discussion. Also, it's important to know that we can compare in and out group on the different dimensions. And we can, in principle, sometimes we can choose a different outgroup, on a different in-group when we want to compare in-group and out. So this is flexibility is there. So we are, as individuals, we are likely to change our in-group and out-group depending on the identity or on the criteria, on the dimension we are looking at, or if we are, for example, not entirely satisfied with our group, or we want to change our personal standing, we might disassociate from one group and join another. Actually, it has been explicitly shown in one study, also quite old study, but I find it nice, that under certain conditions, groups might explicitly or implicitly favor outgroups. And it happens very often with the members of lower status groups, which under certain conditions might prefer to associate themselves with higher status outgroup instead of the own in-group. It particularly happens when the group wants to enhance existing social structure. So to say, under certain conditions, and the study pertains to the US, they found that US Americans, Afro-Americans in the US, under certain conditions, prefer the outgroups of whites once they belong to higher socioeconomic status. So that's one, I wanted to show this flexibility. So for our analysis, this will relevant because we will look at the attitude of German minorities of Muslim background. And on the one hand, we might assume that due to the common religion due to the common higher religiosity. In the sense of MENA is, by the way, Middle East and Northern Africa, and many of those people speak Arabic. We would argue that these groups might have a higher preference for partnerships with Syrian and or Afghan refugees than having partnerships with other countries. So they might, if they're put with a choice, you prefer someone from Syria or you prefer someone from Russia, they would under certain conditions actually prefer Syrians because of shared identity. However, if we buy the argument that they might actually switch to favoring the out group, we might find no higher preference for partnership with Syrian and Afghan for these refugees from Turkish and MENA origin. Okay, these are our broad hypotheses, and let me bring you to our data. And we will, as I said, this module we introduced to you has been run in the Skills for You data set. It has been introduced into wave 9, which was fielded in the beginning of 2022, very fresh data. It's not yet released, but I will be released soon. Our respondents are about 26 years old. So we have about 25, 27 in this range. So this kind of age in which people would normally search for partners. So this is what makes this data set very attractive, because we are kind of asking people, not just general population of 70 years old, to think about partnerships or hypothetical partnerships, but the young people who are actually in the phase when we are doing that. Our total sample is 2,300 almost. This is a distribution of migration background. We have 61% with no migration background are up to third generation. We have beyond third generation, by the way. We have 8% who are first generation immigrants, 28% who are children of immigrants, and 3% who are grandchildren of immigrants. So you see, it's basically about second generation. The survey is just for your information, because I already thought that you might be interested. Started in 2010. And we started when our respondents were 15. We started in school with them, and we have been following them, as you see, already for 12 years. And you see that we started with somewhat bigger sample. This is all panel mortality. We started with 5,000 students. We always sample students with migration background. As you see, originally, we have kind of half and half. 49% with no migration background, and this was our original sample. So with the panel attrition, we lose more immigrants, as you see. And in wave 6, we refreshed our samples, so we kind of boosted it. Wave 6 in the year 2016, when there were about 20, we got 5,800 immigrants, and you see already some change in the distribution. But actually, this makes our data also very much usable in wave 6, where we reduce it, and also wave 1. But it's getting below with each year. This is just for you. We won't stop on that. If you at any moment want to look with all the constructs we have, when we included what, so you can have a very nice overview what we have in the data. I won't make you check your vision, but if you want to look at it afterwards, this is a very nice overview. Maybe you can use it for the topics you are examining. So let me show how our vignette looks like. This is the vignette. So this is the text that respondents got. So they got a text. We have met someone who came to Germany as a refugee from Syria a few years ago. This person is a Christian, and religion plays an important role in his or her life. The person has a tertiary educational degree. And then comes a question: in general, would you be willing to engage in a committed romantic relation and a partnership with the described person? And then was a scale from 1 to 10. So the people would pick the box whether they would do. The underlined parts are the parts which belong, which varied, and this varied in a way that is shown here. So these are the dimensions which were which were put in our experimental dimension. First, this type of a partnership. And we had 3: marriage, committed partnership, and casual partnership or dating. So this would be substituted with another two, right? Then we have origin, and it was Syria, someone coming from Syria, or someone coming from Afghanistan, or a person born in Germany without migration background, or a person born in Germany with migration. Then for religion denomination, we had Christian and Muslim. For religiosity, we had religion doesn't play a big role in his life. For her life, religion plays an important role. And finally, we have educational attainment, was binomial, never has been involved in tertiary education and has a tertiary income. So this is what we vary, which creates an experimental condition. You might ask, what about a homosexual relationship? We ignore that. We, in German, it's a good thing, use the word person, and person is without gender. So everybody does it as he or she thinks. So in principle, since in this population, there will be not many people who engage in homosexual relationship, we largely have, if we ask men, they will report us female partners and all. We did not receive here the gender of our Indians. So it could be men, it could be women, depending on the respondent. Yeah? Okay. So this is the effort of factorial survey design. Factorial survey design could be very popular in recent days. It be used in many things, but sometimes even things that are not very like where factorial design does not pretty much fit. But for examining preferences, it's a very good method or attitude as well. Factorial survey design can really disentangle all the dimensions. So if we kind of cross all the dimensions, we will get 96 here. 96 possible combinations of all the factors in dimension. For our study, we took 48 vignettes. So to say, we have two-level interactions. We could have 2 dimensions in all variations, but no more than that. You could go for more, but at some point it becomes the universe of vignettes becomes very large, and it's necessary to have a very large sample or to let people work with very many vignettes in order to get very interesting. So we went for 48, and we allowed a person to rate 4 vignettes. There are like different ideas how many one could rate. I guess one could go even for 6 vignettes, but at some point, if you ever done that, you will notice that it's tiring. It takes a long, and at some point, people also start to discover the pattern. So we went for 4. We randomized all our vignettes. So basically, at the end of the day, we had almost 10,000 vignettes evaluated by almost 2,500 respondents. For analysis, we use regression analysis with clustered standard errors, so vignettes clustered in this. Okay. So before I'll walk you through the results, let me, how am I doing with the time?
Fine.
Okay. Let me show you very important things, a distinction between a vignette person and a service. This is important to remember that we have this description of a person, and this person is called vignette person. Hypothetical person, and we have respondents. These are people who answer this vignette. So basically, what you can see from this table that we have more or less similar dimension. We could capture similar dimension for both vignette person and survey respondent, and this is necessary to analyze the model. Yeah. So we have for vignette person, as you remember, no tertiary education. Tertiary education in the data, we could also know the highest education degree of respondents, and we could build a similar distinction. Religious denomination for our vignette person is Christian or Muslim. For our respondents, we can have other religions, and we can use it. So most importantly, we will focus here on non-religious people, Christian or Muslim. Religiosity is measured in a similar way, and migration background, we saw the 4 categories we have for the vignette person. For respondents, we have more categories. We have country of origin or country of origin of parents and grandparents, but we coded it in a similar way. So we have natives, no migration background, Turkey plus MENA. We tried separately, but the estimates were very similar, so we put it together. Then we put a combined category in Europe. In Germany, it's mostly driven by Eastern Europeans, but also Southern Europeans. So also estimates when we put it separately, they're quite similar, so we put them together. And we put the rest, which is not much can be said about it, but we had to do it. Now, distribution, just shortly for your information, this is a distribution of our respondent sample. Yeah, so you see we have 31 with university degree, this distribution of religiosity, 30% almost not religious, 16% Christian, 10% Muslim. Religiosity, mostly not important, 75% not important, 25% important. And this is the distribution of origins, 59%. No migration, but around 9% Turkey and MENA, 25% Europe, and 7% the rest. Okay. Now I'm coming to results, and my first result, I would like to show you that we have a very clear pattern of velocity. So let me walk you through again. That's why I introduced you to these respondents and vignette persons, because it kind of starts to be complicated. Yeah. So what you have here is on the left side, these are the characteristics of the vignette person. And here, what is shown is how respondents with specific characteristics assess a vignette person, which is shown here. So let's look at the upper part. So we have respondents who have a university degree. And here we see whether the respondents with a university degree would prefer someone with a university degree as opposed to someone who never went to university. The line in the middle is 0, so it's the reference category. If we are in the positive dimension, this would mean that this person is preferred. Even in the negative dimension, this means that this person is not preferred. On the other hand, the reference. So first of all, let's look at these two estimates, and we see basically that it's actually irrespective of characteristics of a respondent. Everyone prefers someone with a university degree, and some refugee with a university degree, as opposed to someone who has never been attended university. So highly educated refugees are preferred by most people. They are preferred more by people with a university degree, who seems much more positive, but they are also preferred for people without a university. So it's a trade-off. If you are not educated, if you go for dating or whatever, a refugee, he or she should rather be educated. But still, there is a certain homophoby for highly educated. Now we have religion, and it's similar way. Let's look at someone who is Muslim and clear track. So people who are Muslim prefer Muslim image. So it's in positive area. On the other hand, people who are Christian or non-religious prefer people who are not Muslim in this sense. This negation of Muslim in preference for Christians are stronger for Christians. It's more negative here. So we and people of no religion also prefer Christian, but to a less.
¿Has visto tu nombre? Bueno, está ahí.
Could you please switch off your microphones, the ones who are at home, please?
So here we see regarding religion, we have a very, very clear homophoby trend. And now regarding religiosity, we see that here again, religious people, they're more or less indifferent. They are not so much preferring highly religious, but not religious prefer people strongly not preferring religion. Again, we have strong homophoby for non-religious. So general picture, so I could say, if refugees are better educated, better less religious, and we have strong homophily for certain groups. Now let us see education, but now check this we know in practice. So to say, we're not looking at all partnerships in the group, but differentiate between marriage with highly educated, committed relationship with highly educated, and dating with highly educated. And what we see here, actually, for someone without university degree, no difference. So they slightly prefer individuals who are highly educated, but it doesn't matter for marriage, committed relationship or dating. Now we're coming for someone looking at someone with a university degree, and here we have quite significant we know it. So if it's marriage, then the preference for highly educated is the strongest, and it goes down the less committed relationship. So they would date, preferably with someone with university, but if it goes into the direction of marriage, the homophily should be stronger. We also check some heterogeneities, just maybe to give you some, not without going too much into detail, but we check, for example, difference between male respondents and female respondents, because we know that the traditionalist societies might be the way that people have different demands for female partner versus male partner. And here it's interesting to see that this, we are talking about male respondents, meaning that the refugee is female. We see here that for dating, no longer so much matters when respondent is male and refugee is female. But when respondent is female and refugee is male, it's a much stronger window. So in that case, it matters more. But we can go into detail. Maybe it's too detailed to discuss it now for Q&A if you have questions. Religious denomination now. So we again check it by level of commitment, marriage, committed, and dating a Muslim. You see, actually, what we see here is there is some indication of knowing committed relationships somehow outstanding. We assume that since committed relationships for Muslims it's not common, it's not very much pronounced. People do not tend to live without marriage with someone for a long time. Might be that they misunderstood this commitment. Maybe like this commitment was overstressed. So, but if you kind of, it's a little bit strange, behaving strange, but if you compare marriage and dating, obviously we see for marriage, Muslims would prefer Muslims. And we prefer less Muslims, again, still Muslims, but less if it's just dating. For other groups, we also see a particular Christian, very clear cut, we know they would not prefer Muslims for marriage and would care less if it's dating. For non-religious, they don't really care, which is also nice findings. Religious people care less, non-religious people care less, but again, for dating, it's almost 0. We also check for heterogeneities here. I think I would not go into much detail, just showing you this. This is very interesting gender differences. Again, if it's a male respondent searching for a female partner, and if this person is Muslim, you see how for dating he doesn't care. For dating, it could be, it doesn't have to be Muslim partner. For females, it's a very much stronger other tendency. Female respondents who are Muslim would not even go for dating with someone who's not Muslim. So again, this is clear-cut gender difference, and we show it very often in qualitative interviews that male Muslims date pretty much everyone, but they say explicitly, but I would never marry this. I would marry someone Muslim. And this is what we see here. Pronounced for male respondents dating females, but not the other way around. Here we have a very strong traditionalism with regard to when we go to Winoli. And finally, religiosity. We checked for religious, highly religious and low religious individuals. Here we have less pattern by the way. So by low religiosity, you see absolutely no pattern. By highly religiosity, okay, again, committed relationship looks funny, but other way, not very important. Apparently, religiosity is, as we think, it's connected to religion more. I mean, depends whether you're religious within certain religions. So we check that, and here you see For Christians, how the religiosity plays around. And these are for Muslims, how religiosity plays around. And we do have some patterns, but due to the sample sizes here, they become very small. We cannot distinguish any pattern in this. But it's more in the negative area for Christian respondents, more positive kind of thing. I won't go too much into detail. It seems like we know it doesn't really work so much for religiosity. And now, obviously, we started with this question, and that's why I discussed this whole in and out group theory. Actually, in our project, we motivated it by the fact that let's imagine that refugees do not have enough partners of the same origin in Germany. Maybe they will kind of, let's say, use their other characteristics, and maybe they will go and partner with other Muslims in Germany. We have a lot of Turks, we have a lot of people from MENA countries, there's a strong tradition of immigrants from Lebanon. So the question is, okay, if I'm Syrian and I don't have enough Syrian females, maybe I'm fine with having a Lebanese female. Yeah, kind of the same religion, the same language, similar tradition. And we argued maybe it's the other way around. So someone who is Lebanese or from MENA countries, if put in front of the choice, German or someone from Syria, they would prefer someone from Syria because they have the same religions, the same language, kind of have similar traditions, maybe even listen to the same music, and so on. So the question is, would we find that Muslim minorities in Germany would prefer eventually Syrians or Afghan refugees as compared to Germans? So that's what we check. Your guess? Right. And more, if I'm asking, right? Let me walk you through, and I think it's an amazing finding. So what we have here, these are respondent characteristics. Native Germans blue, a kind of orange, Turkish plus MENA, European is green, and others yellow. So what are the contrasts? So here's the reference category German, no migration background. It's mainstream population. This group is comparing German with migration background as opposed to German with no migration background. As you see here, practically no difference. Even for Europeans, they would prefer someone with migration background as opposed to Germans slightly. But otherwise, it's zero line, no practice. They would take any if put into this comparison. The second comparison would be Syrian versus someone who is German without migration background. And here, interesting finding. Actually, in general, people would prefer a German person. So they are in the negative, they reject Syrians as opposed to Germans. Less so this other group, they don't care, but I won't interpret too much, it's a very heterogeneous group. But let's look at these three groups. And funny enough, people from Turkish and MENA background reject Syrians strongest of all groups. This is that we did not expect. It's very strong rejection of this group. And you would say maybe it's kind of, it's an artifact or something very similar to Afghan people, even if it's slightly stronger. So all groups reject refugees. The strongest rejection is found among the group for which we thought that they might find some immigrant relationship in this group. Apparently, and this is our argument, apparently the group of Turkish and MENA second generation might feel more in with the German native born, maybe because of socialization, maybe because of the social status. They kind of want to be associated with a majority, with the society where they were born and raised, as opposed to newcomer refugee, which they reject strongest of all the groups. Now we look at one more final slide. We know him. We know him by origin. So here again, married to Syrian, committed with Syrian, dating with Syrian, reference is native, and our four groups. Here our Muslim groups, you see we know him here. They would, maybe they would date them, more likely to date, but still it's all in negative area. Interesting that European would date Syrians, would rather not marry, no committed relationship, but would date, more or less. Afghans is actually worse. There's negative, you see already difference, there is different perception of Syrian Afghan refugees. Much stronger negation of rejection of marriage with Afghans, but there is some tendency towards winnowing. More likely to date, again, still rejection, but more open. Okay, so I think I talked much. Let me conclude. We find that we could really find homophily, not on all dimensions, very much on religious denomination. This is probably the strongest and the more clear-cut homophily tendency. Education, we found it only for highly educated. It was interesting to see that actually even not low educated people without university degree prefer highly educated women. So there could be some kind of trade-offs. Yeah. So if refugee, then at least highly educated. Religiosity we find actually only among non-religious, but for the rest, it's not so much working. We found actually pretty much holding for all categories. Both for the dimensions of religious denomination and level of education, particularly highly educated, less clear-cut pattern by individual religiosity, in it's much stronger for female respondents dating or marrying male predominantly. And finally, this question about in and out. Yeah, we kind of, as from our Western perspective, we tend to say, okay, we are in group and they, Muslims, are the outgroup. Apparently, the minorities do not associate themselves with the other Muslim group as an in-group, but instead actually associate themselves with the majority native born as an in-group, at least for the sake of partnership formation. So we see that in terms of religious denomination, religiosity and level of education, often descendants of immigrants in Germany should rather prefer refugees, but it's not what we find. Instead, they prefer refugees least of all the groups, which assume that these ethnic boundaries and in and out group distinctions are very fluid and pretty much depend on the context. And we still find winnowing hypothesis here. Now, which brings me to the question with which I started today: are heterogeneous Western societies ready for intermarriages with cultural dissimilarities? Based on our study, our results, I would say no. If anything, they're ready for dating, but not yet for marriage so much with these groups. But maybe if dating starts, people start learning each other, and it might develop at some point. Okay, here I will stop. Just short take-home message. Homophily hypothesis largely holds. Winnowing hypothesis largely holds. In and versus output differentiation. Yeah, it actually shows us some fluidity in boundaries in and output definition. In the next step, this will develop into a written paper, and we will focus also on mechanisms actually checking whether, particularly for this in and out group. I found it's very interesting finding, unexpected to me, finding that obviously out groups tend to consider totally different out groups as opposed to what we think they should consider out groups. So we will check whether it pretty much depends on the patterns of ethnic identification among minorities. That is to say, maybe minorities who strongly identify with Germany are the ones who reject partnerships with refugees, or maybe they're more politically correct. We don't know. I mean, it was interesting to see the Germans are not that rejecting of refugees, maybe because of some sort of political correctness. We don't know. We'll check that. Status differences, maybe again, this status kind of upgrade plays a role. So the highly educated Turkish or MENA second generation are the ones who associate with Germans more than with refugees. And again, individual religiosity might play the role. So less religious minorities, Muslim minorities might prefer Germans as opposed to refugees who are known to be more religious. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rina. I found the lecture fascinating. I have learned that refugees may suffer stigma even from other immigrants, which is something that I think is interesting in itself. So now the floor is open for whoever wants to make a point. Eva? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My name is Stefanie. Thank you so much for this presentation. I found it really, really fascinating. I also wanted to ask you about presenting the finding that you find so interesting about the immigrant outlook. And I'm wondering, as you mentioned that in your sample, you have first generation, second generation, and third generation. Have you been able to break down the responses by generation?
We haven't done that yet. We saw that the sample size would be very low, but we might maybe like separate second generation. I was very cautious at some point. We are coming to numbers, estimate and so unstable. I showed you some heterogeneities by migrant and native born. There was already confidence intervals were huge, but we can check it at least whether the point estimates show into that direction. I'm sure that our confidence intervals will be just too much.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the sample size issue, but if there's a way to look, because I think that's where your answer may lie. Because I think that from at the end you were saying that minority groups don't behave the way we expect them to behave, then I think that's exactly what's happening.
Right.
That, second generation don't want to be perceived
as an immigrant. Yeah.
So if they were to carry a racist they would be going through again the whole discrimination.
Right. Very good point. We'll check that. I think it's a very good distinction that first generation, although it's very, very tiny group in our sample, might have stronger affinity maybe with refugees or in shared common experiences and be more, but we'll check. I'm almost sure that we cannot produce any valid result, but at least maybe trend.
Yeah. I think it's important to know it's not just about affinity with the other group, but about experiencing of discrimination.
Yeah, exactly.
By them. I think that's maybe.
It's actually a good point. I think we don't have to guess. We have a question whether they experience discrimination. So this would be.
I think it's much better for the people who are to hear that. Otherwise, they are not going to the ones who are home are not going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if, because immigrants, they prefer natives rather than other immigrants. If this could also be, because it's not like you say prefer necessarily what we saw at first as the out group. We expected the natives to be their out group, but they still prefer natives because they, as an immigrant, you come as sort of like an alien. You come by yourself, you need to build a life, you have no social net around you. So if you think this has an influence on how they change, maybe like do this in and out change.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think the explanation is. That this kind of the idea which I showed that minority groups might prefer out group in order to raise their status in society. We said that they would be better off if they have a partner in the majority, because it would for the first generation might secure their status or but this it's not so much relevant for our sample because these are people who were already in school who surveyed for the first time. But in principle, they can improve their social standing by associating themselves with the majority rather than associating themselves with rather stigmatized minority as the refugees are. I think we will check. I think discrimination is a very good point, and also looking at social status of individuals. If you are highly educated, you would rather partner up than this is in inverted commas, obviously. So, choosing partner among branches.
So, any question, comment? Yeah.
I got two questions about the vignette person. So the first one, was this vignette person Afghan or an Afghan refugee? Because in Germany, we already got a lot of Afghans from about 2000 other Afghans were coming. So what was written for the vignette person?
It was Afghan refugee who came recently.
So, okay, so it was really clarified. Okay,
Yeah.
Because on one slide, I wasn't sure if it's only Afghan or.
No, I just shorted it for the pictures, but
Okay.
this is about Afghan refugees. It's explicitly stated that this is refugees who arrived recently.
Okay, and the second question was about education, because for us as researcher, it makes sense to have no university degree, and university degree dichotomized. How we say it, yeah. But how was it written for the vignette person? Was it written tertiary education? Okay, that's understandable. But what was the other part?
The other part never attended university. I see your point. It would be much better to have more detailed degrees, and we also were kind of contemplating having someone who never attended school. But then it doesn't really fit for the German majority, because there are practically no who never attended school, but there are many who are from Afghanistan who never attended school. So we kind of searched for the best solution, and we compromised on having highly educated tertiary education, which is clear, had a university degree, as opposed to someone who never attended a university. This was the dichotomy. So to say tertiary versus non-tertiary, and could be anything.
Because I wondered, because this sounds a bit negative, like never have attended university. Like it sets the focus on what this person hasn't done in its life, and not what the person has done in its life. For example, a formation in I don't know, in medical jobs or anything. So there are a lot of things people can do without having a university degree. So it sets the focus on what this person has not.
Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah.
The issue is if you remember this vignette, it's a long text, and practically there is as much mental capacity for the respondent if they start to figure out tiny details. In the end, you cannot, with this, so many dimensions, several dimensions, and many things which vary. The more detail you provide, the less I think people will notice those details. That's why it's the easiest way is this dichotomy. Although I totally agree with you, we miss a lot of information because never attended university could be having vocational training or having nothing, and this is a big difference. But I think from the cognitive psychology and from the vignette studies, we know that vignettes should be kept simple. If they're too complicated, people abandon that. It's too much. And remember, they have to read for text like that. It's always dimensions. At some point, it's boring. At some point, and you think, what is? I just had the same thing. What's going on here? That's why the rule is here: be simple, and that was our compromise for simplicity.
Okay, thank you.